Our hearts are broken. Ace has passed on. No one can touch Ace's legacy. I know he loved the fans. He told me many times.
2 days ago, the world lost Ace Frehley, the man who turned Kiss into fire. At 74, his last message to Gene Simmons wasn't anger, it was forgiveness. But why did it take 5 decades, 4 breakups, and 1 near-death moment for him to finally say it? And what secret truth did Gene promise never to reveal until now?
Longtime lead guitarist of Kiss unfortunately died yesterday after a recent fall at his home. He was 74 years old.
Then nothing but suspense. The world holds its breath. One question pulses in every listener's mind. What were his last words to Gene Simmons? They whisper about betrayal, silence, grudges, yet those final lines weren't a scream or insult. They were a reckoning. In the hours following the announcement, fans scoured every public post, every interview, searching. Why now? Why Gene? And more importantly, why leave that message unheralded until death? Ace Frehley died on October 16, 2025, after a violent fall at home that caused a brain bleed. His family confirmed he passed peacefully, surrounded by loved ones. Investigations noted that he had earlier in September fallen in his home studio, resulting in canceled tour dates and concern about his health trajectory. Still, the moment that ignited the world was not the fall. It was the message Ace left behind. This isn't a note etched in defiance. It carries gratitude, apology, admission, and possibly the most human reckoning of a rock legend who lived larger than life. But what exactly did he write? Was it one line, a paragraph, a confession? Soon we'll trace how that message connects back to decades of war, reunion, silence, and reinvention. Because those words, simple yet seismic, cycled back into a lifetime of history, and they demanded an answer. Next, we go back to 1973 for the spark before the flame. He never planned a press release. He just typed those lines, quiet, sharp, final. Few saw them coming. But suddenly they rippled through Kiss history. This message wasn't full of blame. It named fights, fire, fame, and a kind of acceptance no fan ever expected. Ace reached out to Gene when so many doors between them already slammed shut. Here's what most reports confirm. 2 days before his death, Ace sent Gene a short note. It said, "Thanks for the fire, the fights, and the fame. You were right. The music outlived us both." That's only a few sentences, but those lines carry more weight than any solo he ever played. Think of this. Ace had survived electrocution on stage in 1976, nearly died from injury, fought addiction, walked away from fame, come back again. Yet in the end, he looked toward the one man who loomed largest in his life and offered peace. He was severely electrocuted in Florida in 1976 and later came back to finish the show. Why now? At 74, after decades of silence, why Gene and not someone else? He canceled tour dates after a fall in his studio in September 2025. He spent weeks recovering. During that time, sources say he began writing letters to former bandmates, old friends, family, closing chapters he left open too long. That note to Gene was the final one. Many believed Ace would go out blasting riffs, a final solo. Instead, he went out with a line. And that line forces a question. Did Ace finally see Gene as a rival or as a brother in a very messy, dangerous war? In the next part, we rewind to 1973, before any message, before any breakups, when 4 hungry men made a band that bent the world. They met in New York in 1973 when rock still smelled like sweat and ambition. 4 men, Gene Simmons, Paul Stanley, Peter Criss, and soon Ace Frehley, decided their sound would roar louder than their pasts. Ace auditioned after seeing a small ad. Lead guitarist wanted. He showed up with 1 red shoe, 1 orange, hauling a battered amplifier through subways. Somehow, that odd mix drew attention. They tested 60 guitarists. He stood out. He later designed the logo with the lightning bolt SS. The band named themselves KISS in early 1973. Within months, Ace picked a persona, Space Ace. A starburst mask, white face paint, silver gear. He wanted to be different, cosmic, otherworldly. The others followed. They began playing in tiny New York bars, sometimes 4 people in the audience. Each night they pushed harder, makeup, smoke, wild costumes. They wanted legend. But record deals rejected them. Their first album, KISS, 1974, only reached number 87 on Billboard. Still, fans soon saw the show was more than riffs. Pyrotechnics, blood-spitting, rising drum kits, KISS invented spectacle in rock. By 1975, a live album broke them into the mainstream. Their tours sold out, stadiums, 20,000, 30,000 people. Ace's guitar style grew weird, raw. He played behind the beat, dragging the music forward. He co-wrote Cold Gin, though Gene took the lead vocals. That song stayed in set lists for decades. But behind the scenes, tensions grew. Ace gave up part-time jobs to live the dream. He once drove a taxi between gigs to pay bills. Meanwhile, Gene pushed branding, management, control. Their visions diverged. The reckless birth of KISS set the stage. By giving each member a mask and myth, they invited both unity and isolation. He didn't just plug in a guitar, he reinvents what guitar means. Ace's solos felt like rockets, loud, sudden, unforgettable. By 1976, KISS stands on a knife's edge. Their album Destroyer hits gold. Their show grows bigger, fire, fog, flying drum kits. Ace's riffs push the sound into uncharted space. He refuses to follow rules. One night in Lakeland, Florida, Ace touches an ungrounded railing and takes a jolt. He goes down mid-song, burns fingertips, loses feeling in hands. But he fights through it. He comes back on stage. The fans scream his name. That moment becomes Shock Me. That song marks his first lead vocal on a KISS record. He uses just a Les Paul and a Marshall amp set on 10. He claims that setup needs no evolution. His tone stays raw, pushed by delay and reverb, atmospheric but bold. His playing feels reckless but precise. Other guitarists later say his work in the mid-70s inspired them to pick up the instrument. Ace also starts experimenting with stage effects. Some guitars puff smoke, others emit lights tied to tempo. He plays with space, noise, and volume, almost like painting with sound. Yet every night he steps on stage, he battles balance, showmanship versus survival. Behind the flames, behind the makeup, his body strains. The electric shock haunts him, but he leans into it. That near-death moment becomes legend. In 1977, Love Gun album launches. Shock Me becomes anthem. Ace proves he's not just a sideman. He becomes essential. The solo path he forges now splits him from the rest. Still, the bigger battle lies ahead, when fandom, fame, ego, and business forces begin to tug him apart. Something great often carries a heavy price. Ace's brilliance glowed on stage, but off stage, pain crept through cracks. In the late 70s and early 80s, KISS becomes a machine. Albums, tours, endorsement deals. The band churns out Rock and Roll Over, Love Gun, Dynasty, each album selling hundreds of thousands or more. But inside, Ace feels squeezed. The pressure to conform, to play every night, to sell every poster, he feels it deep. Ace fights demons. He battles alcohol for years. In interviews later, he admits he began drinking as a teenager. And by the mid-1970s, drinking fills gaps, numbs fear. Years pass where his health shakes, relationships fray. Yet he keeps going. In 2024, he said he remained sober since 2006. At the same time, Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley push harder on the business side. Merch, licensing, branding. They see Kiss as a living brand. Ace sees Kiss as music, raw, alive. That clash, brand versus art, buries arguments under stage lights. Record deals get ugly. Creative control becomes a battleground. Ace writes hit songs like Cold Gin in 1973. He remains proud of those credits. But some albums he hears but can't change. He watches others control what he helped build. That weighs on him. In 1980, a wild moment. Ace drives a DeLorean drunk on a New York highway, crashes, license taken away. This event hits headlines. It reminds him and fans there's a limit. But he keeps performing, keeps pushing. Even as his playing grows sharper, his spirit softens at edges. He longs for respect, to be heard, to be seen beyond the mask. He speaks rarely. He retreats. He doubts. Yet still he plays. In many ways, that mask becomes a fortress and a prison. Genius and chaos need each other. He stops showing up. He fights inside. He draws a line. By 1982, Ace already feels the strain. He says he's tired of the makeup, the loss of control, the change in direction. In one interview, he says he quit partly because of alcohol use and because the band's sound was shifting too far from what he loved. Gene and Paul later claim they fired him. But Ace disputes that. He says he quit. He insists nobody ever forced him out. In a 2025 interview, he says, "They say in interviews they fired me, but I was never fired from Kiss. I quit both times. The fallout shakes Kiss." Ace's departure costs the band big money, according to him. He claims that walking away cost Gene and Paul roughly $7.5 million. During the transition, Creatures of the Night album is released, October 1982. That album lists Ace as member, but he had minimal musical input. Sessions mostly run without him. Then, during the band's 10th anniversary tour, they bring in Vinnie Vincent as a replacement guitarist. Ace agrees to promote the album in Europe, but legal wrangling delays his full exit. Some shows bill him as ill or recovering, though insiders say disagreement and damaged relationships lie at the core. That first breakup is a micro-war. Art versus commerce, freedom versus contract, ego versus respect. Ace afraid he'll lose himself in what he helped build. Paul and Gene struggle to keep momentum. Fans shocked. In interviews later, Ace reflects, leaving probably saved his life. He says he knew if he stayed, he'd drown in expectations, drinking, and the makeup. His departure felt necessary, even if it felt like betrayal. Next, we see how Gene built an empire while Ace tried to pick up the pieces of his identity. In the years after Ace left, Gene Simmons starts stacking power beyond bus lines. Meanwhile, Ace picks up broken pieces of himself. When Ace exits in '82, Kiss isn't just a band, it's a brand. Gene registers the makeup designs with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Every logo, every image, every lightning bolt SS becomes his property. The 4 original makeup designs held under Simmons licensing, millions pour in through merchandise, t-shirts, action figures, comic books. In the late 1970s, their retail merch numbers hit tens of millions. Some reports say merch sales reached $50 to $100 million plus by the early 80s. Gene watches the band's back end, the licensing, the deals, like a hawk. He markets Kiss as a spectacle first, rock second. He turns challenge into contract. Ace, meanwhile, feels stripped of control. He fights with addiction. He struggles to make money solo. His name helps, but the infrastructure belongs to Gene. Ace releases his 1978 solo album the same day as the other 3 members. His sells best. It earns platinum. Covering New York groove, he proves he can stand on his own. Still, he lacks the corporate muscle behind Kiss. He lacks the license machine, the trademark engine. In the 1990s and 2000s, while Ace tours solo and rebuilds, Gene expands. He sells KISS brand rights, licensing deals. Kiss becomes a franchise. Ace remains former member in many eyes, even when he returns for reunions. So the war isn't on stage anymore. It moves behind scenes. Who owns what? Who controls imagery? Who cashes in? The loudest solo can't cover a bad contract. Next, we dive into the reunion era, a moment where history might heal or trap them further. They step back on stage together again. And for a moment, history holds its breath. In 1995, Kiss does an unplugged session for MTV. They call Ace and Peter Criss to join. The reaction is instant. Fans scream, demand more, flood networks with hope. That acoustic show reignites a spark. The next year, June 28, 1996, Tiger Stadium, Detroit. The original four walk out in full makeup after 16 years apart. Tickets sell out in under an hour, about 50,000 seats gone. In backstage rooms, memory mixes with tension. Peter Criss shares a room with Gene, Ace with Paul. Criss taps a rhythm on Gene's leg. Gene laughs. Ace watches quietly as the crowd, 40,000, 50,000 strong, erupt. On stage, they play Deuce, Cold Gin, songs from the Bleach and Fire years. Paul later says the opening roar nearly lifts him off the stage. He fights to stay in command. But the reunion hides doubts. Behind the smiles, trust feels fragile. Ace doesn't know if this moment lasts. Gene wonders whether control will slip. Paul wonders if promises can hold. They tour for more than a year, 190 shows booked, 8 canceled. They released Psycho Circus in 1998, but many fans later learn Ace and Peter's contributions are minimal. One song matters, Into the Void. It's the only track on Psycho Circus with all 4 originals playing. Ace fights to get his voice on the record. The reunion feels like healing, but it carries strain. Old wounds resurface. Contracts, creative control, resumes of rivalry. Still, for years, they walk forward together again. That act gives fans hope and gives Ace one last chance to reclaim what he helped build. Next, we'll see how that hope cracks under business battles, the deal wars that rocked the reunion. They agreed to reunite. They all stepped back onto the stage. But behind closed doors, the war for power had only changed form. Ace claims the deals during the reunion were rigged against him. He says he saw contracts where his name looked equal, but the fine print erased him. Gene and Paul called it business as usual. Yet Ace insists he lost control of what he helped create. Look at Psycho Circus, 1998, marketed as the first real album by the original lineup in nearly 20 years. But in truth, Ace and Peter's musical contributions are minimal. Producer Bruce Fairbairn decided to hire session players instead, even though the reunion was supposed to be full circle. Ace later says he fought just to get one song on the album. He submitted 3 songs, only one made it into the void. He had to push and negotiate. Kiss ends their final show on December 2nd, 2023 at Madison Square Garden. Ace never appears. The world watches and wonders, did he leave the stage by choice or by force? Late September 2025, the moment sets the final chapter in motion. Ace falls in his home studio. Reports say he slipped, hit his head, and moments later walked to a phone. He canceled his show at Antelope Valley Fair on September 25th. He called it a minor fall, but doctors called it serious. He had already been touring behind 10,000 volts, his first solo album in years. Many saw him back in form, sales steady, shows booked. Then suddenly, the health stops the music. On October 6th, he cancels the rest of his 2025 tour, citing ongoing medical issues. Fans and media digest it, worry. Many hope it's a temporary pause. Then the news breaks, a brain bleed. A fall leads to intracranial hemorrhage, blood between skull and brain. He's placed on life support, hooked to a ventilator. Some sources say his condition doesn't improve. At that point, the tone changes. The rock legend, who once played with sparks flying, now fights for basic life signs. The same man who weathered shock on stage in 1976 now lies still in hospital. Some reports claim that in those final hours, his family faced a decision to remove life support. Others say he passed peacefully, surrounded by loved ones, hours after the decision. He dies October 16, 2025 in Morristown, New Jersey. That date becomes a marker, the moment when silence finally falls. The shock isn't just that a rock star died. The real shock is how fast the man who survived so many wars, on stage, with fame, with addiction, can be undone in a fall. Next, we'll dig into his final message to Gene Simmons, the act that turned tragedy into a statement nobody expected. His final note hits the old war zones with calm force. Ace writes, "Thanks for the fire, the fights, and the fame. You were right. The music outlived us both." In 2 brief lines, he folds decades of history, anger, love, regret, and respect. That message seems like peace, but it also pushes a question. Did he finally accept that one man shaped his life as much as he shaped his music? He could have left a long letter. He could have cleaned up fights, but instead, he leaves raw fragments. That choice tells us a lot. It says he knew some things can't be explained. In that light, his final message holds even more weight. It comes from a man who knew the machinery behind his myth. He built sound, identity, tension, freedom. He lived the fight between music and business. Now, we move into how his message lived on, and why the music truly outlasted every conflict. His voice may be silent now, but every chord, every solo, carries his presence forward. In the hours after his passing, streaming of Kiss's catalog surges. Songs like Detroit Rock City, Shock Me, Cold Gin climb charts again. Fans blast the classics. Tribute stations run Ace's solos non-stop. He used to electrify stadiums. Now he charges playlists. But beyond numbers, his legacy lives in every guitarist who dared twist light and noise. Those who read his solos, tried his bends, chased his tone. His track Shock Me originates in a near electrocution in Florida, December 1976. During a show, he touched an ungrounded railing, suffered burns, lost feeling in his hand, but walked back and finished the concert. That song became his signature, and years later ranks among Guitar World's 100 greatest guitar solos. His face, the silver star mask, the speaking silence, all become iconic. Bands use his songs in tribute. Fans play his riffs in bedrooms, garages, late at night. New listeners discover Kiss through Ace. Older fans relive nights under stadium lights. Gene and Paul call him an irreplaceable rock soldier. They declare he is forever part of KISS's legacy. Peter Criss says he was present in his final days, calls him brother. When we close the curtain, we don't close the story. Because Ace's message did more than end a feud, it suspended it. He gave us lines to live on. And when we listen again to Cold Gin, Detroit Rock City, Shock Me, we hear his voice saying, "Music outlives us both." Ace died on October 16, 2025, at age 74 at his home in Morristown, New Jersey, after complications from a fall. The family says he was surrounded by loved ones and that his final hours carried caring words, prayers, and intention. A representative says that fall caused a brain bleed, that medical trauma proved fatal. His passing marks the first death among the original 4 KISS members. After his death, tributes poured across the music world. Gene Simmons, Paul Stanley released joint statements calling Ace essential and irreplaceable, a rock soldier. Peter Criss posted with heartbreak. He says he and his wife were with Ace in his final hours. Musicians from Pearl Jam to Steve Vai, Tom Morello to Mike McCready speak of Ace as a bridge, someone whose riffs let them hear worlds they didn't know existed. Historically, we remember him as the spaceman, the makeup, the pyrotechnics, the signature riffs. But when you strip away the stage, you see a man full of contradictions: dreamer, fighter, wounded, proud, flawed, hopeful. The legacy remains alive, not just in streaming numbers or tribute concerts, but in every kid who plugs in for the first time, tries to bend a string, chases that echo of Shock Me or Cold Gin. In rock history, new chapters begin when legends leave. Who will pick up the torch? Which battles, not yet won, will someone else continue? We end here, but the riff, the message, the life, they go on. If this story made you feel something, you already know. Rock never dies. It just changes shape. Subscribe for the next untold chapter waiting in the shadows of the stage.